to Future Talk, the podcast series that explores how curious minds use science and technology for the greater good of humankind. I'm your host, Dr. Inez Dawson, and today we're going to discuss how making life-saving and life-enhancing treatments for patients will accelerate in the future by a paradigm shift in the biopharmaceutical industry. So let me introduce you to my three expert guests. Firstly, a very warm welcome to Dr. Chris Hwang, Chief Technology Officer at Transcenta, a biopharmaceutical company with fully integrated capabilities in discovery, research, development, and manufacturing of antibody-based therapeutics. Chris, so glad you could join us today.
Thanks, Inez. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And a big hello to Dr. Kelvin Lee, Director of Nimble, the National Institute for Innovation in Manufacturing Biopharmaceuticals based in Newark, United States. Kelvin, so glad to have you on today.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
And last, but by no means least, a very warm welcome to Merrilee Whitney, Head of the Biocontinuum platform at Merck KGaA Darmstadt, Germany. Merrilee, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me and really looking forward to the discussion with my colleagues.
So welcome to all three of you. And now to give listeners a better understanding of today's topic, it would be absolutely fantastic if you, Merrilee, could briefly explain what, firstly, biopharmaceuticals are, and secondly, how will they benefit from this so-called bioprocessing 4.0?
Great question, and more than happy to discuss. So today we have a lot of drugs that are able to treat a multitude of diseases that have touched all of our lives, to be quite frank, whether it's multiple sclerosis, whether it's cancer, etc. And really, what we focus on is helping companies manufacture those proteins and purify them so that they're safe for the consumption of the patient at the end of the day. Now, the way that this happens currently is in a very step-by-step manufacturing process. And it works today, but there are significant opportunities within the industry to make that process more efficient, make our facilities more resilient, more sustainable, and I think get drugs to patients faster at the end of the day. So really, what we're focused on, and along with organizations such as Nimble and companies such as Transcenta, is how do we provide the right technologies and solutions that help them achieve those objectives.
Thank you so much, Merrilee, for your explanation. I'm very interested in hearing Chris's perspective. As a biopharmaceutical manufacturer, Transcenta needs to cope with those evolving market trends and business drivers and constantly innovate to advance. Why and how does Transcenta embrace new biomanufacturing approaches and digitalization in your facilities?
Inez, thank you for your question. Though Transcenta is a global company, China is a big market for us, and the landscape here is actually quite different than in the US and Europe. There's a significant drug pricing pressure from the government and from a lot of competition from where there are many agents targeting the same drug, same indications, and same target. For instance, another big driver for us is really the need to significantly increase our process output so that our relatively small manufacturing facility that was very fast to build and easy to expand can provide output of much larger facilities to not just lower the cost of goods, but also provide just-in-time capacity for clinical and commercial production without significant capital upfront investment. This is also critical for us to address industry challenges regarding demand uncertainty. So I said these are the two biggest drivers for us to develop this novel technology for manufacturing. In terms of your question about how, our approach is really to maximize a cell culture upstream productivity where the product is actually produced in a given manufacturing process. We use continuous perfusion. Then we leverage very highly intensified and automated connected and continuous downstream and then other enabling technology to debottleneck the plant output and then maximize space, time, and yields in our facility. So we put together a 5-year plan back in 2018, and I'm happy to report that we have made significant progress and have already demonstrated very high cell culture productivity such that when scaled to a 1,000-liter single-use bioreactor, one such a reactor can produce close to 1 metric tons of product each year. And that this perfusion platform is already implemented for our pipeline molecules starting in 2018.
Thank you so much for your answer. Firstly, congratulations on being on target for the 5-year plan. That must feel so good. And now we've heard a little bit more about the drivers that trigger change and the breakneck competition, both from an economic standpoint and a production one in how biologics are manufactured. Let's turn our attention to Nimble. So, Kelvin, what is Nimble and how does it influence the journey toward Bioprocessing 4.0? What projects is Nimble engaging in to address those evolving market expectations that Chris just told us about?
Well, Nimble is a large-scale public-private partnership to secure our domestic advanced manufacturing competitiveness around biopharmaceuticals. That means we have a consortia that has been established. The consortia includes a number of companies, small companies that are often innovating new technologies, middle-sized companies that are bringing products to the market, and of course, many of the global companies in this space, which includes those that manufacture drug products, as well as those that are technology suppliers to the industry. We also have inside the consortia academic institutions from major research universities to smaller community colleges that are focused on workforce training and workforce development. We also have nonprofits and government agencies and other partners. Altogether, we have more than 200 organizations that have come together within Nimble to share resources. That is, we have a significant amount of federal investment from our U.S. government, which is matched by a significant amount of private sector investment. And the idea is to bring all of those resources together to collaboratively de-risk the promising manufacturing technologies that are needed to realize biomanufacturing of the future. I do want to highlight about Nimble, it's not just only about the technology. It is very significantly also about the training and having a skilled workforce. People think about manufacturing traditionally as being in an environment that is, very dark and very dirty and very dangerous. But I think if you were to visit the kinds of facilities where these medicines are made, you'd find they're really quite quiet and quite clean, extremely clean, and it's pretty cool to work there. And so we try to inspire and train the workforce that's really needed to deploy these technologies.
Thank you so much for painting such a clear picture of the many things that Nimble is doing. And I would like to turn back again to Chris to get your manufacturer's point of view. How difficult have you found it to switch from traditional batch processing to bioprocessing 4.0? And what would you say are the major roadblocks biomanufacturers such as Transcenter may encounter on this transformational journey?
I would say for us, that journey of switching for traditional batch to, I would say, continuous bioprocessing 4.0 it was not difficult. And the reason is that we have a very capable team in place and we have strong expertise in perfusion already, and that we are working with a very capable partner on the downstream side. And then other technologies are becoming available over the past few years. So overall, I think the tools are there, but I guess in terms of the industry adoption of bioprocessing 4.0, how difficult it really depends on how do you define what that next generation processes is. In terms of the process design, although many are working on continuous processing, but there's no dominant design, and each is with its varying degrees of complexity and novelty. But the good thing is, as indicated by Kevin, there's a lot of smart people working on it in the industry and academia, and there's a lot of collaboration, which is absolutely key in advancing such a technology into manufacturing. My advice is really to focus on your business driver and then implement the technology and the ways of working that is best suited to address your needs, and don't over-engineering it. Don't make it more difficult than it is. Our challenges so far, I would say, it's really around the process integration and automation, because you really require a much more integrated ways of working from different partners in different disciplines. And then in terms of intensified downstream, as I mentioned earlier, that we are partnering with Merrilee's team to develop this, I would say, automated batch processing technology that is not that different from the traditional batch processes, but with all the advantages for the continuous process.
Thank you so much for sharing this roadmap with us. Kelvin, from a Nimble perspective, how do industry associations help in removing these roadblocks that we talked about?
Yes, well, as Chris mentioned, risk is a big factor in this industry. And it's, I would argue, a pretty risk-averse industry. And I think when I look at that, I would say a lot of that risk aversion is not only around the financial risk of it being very expensive to bring a medicine to market, but it's such a highly regulated industry, and it is highly regulated with many health authorities around the world that independently review applications to bring medicines to market. And so I think what that means is that companies have really a very low tolerance for taking risks. And those risks might include the development or the implementation of new technologies in manufacturing. And so one of the things that we've observed is that when it comes to manufacturing technologies and implementing new manufacturing approaches, that the industry would rather be a fast second. Nobody wants to be first. Generally speaking, a company that is going to deploy a new manufacturing paradigm in bringing a new medicine to market is not only going to have to answer questions about the safety efficacy of that medicine, but may also have to answer questions about the technology being used to manufacture that medicine. And if those questions from whatever health authority take a day or a week or a month to answer, then that is a day or a week or a month that patients may not have access to that medicine. And ultimately, revenue may not be realized. And so I think that risk is really a business decision. And so within an organization like Nimble, what we allow and try to foster is collaboration in that pre-competitive space to understand the new technologies, to understand the new paradigm, to understand the new analytical method, not so that one company can go first and everybody else can go a fast second, but so that everybody can go first together. And the only way we can do that is by having those shared demonstrations, not only across the industry, but also making that information available to health authorities, to government scientists, to the academic community, to really try to lift all boats, to use that expression.
Fascinating. I actually had no idea that the competition was to be a fast second. I'm sure many of us who aren't experts in the industry would have imagined it's generally a race to be the first in general. So that was really interesting to learn about, and also clearly illustrates the importance of collaboration and a way of hopefully shifting those goals to try and become first as quickly as possible. So Merrilee, Merck KGaA Darmstadt, Germany offers several transformational solutions to support manufacturers in advancing and digitalizing their drug manufacturing processes. I would love to hear your deep dive into the solutions that you provide with your Biocontinuum platform. How do you support Chris's company Transcenter? And what role do you see collaboration playing in removing the roadblocks that we've been talking about?
It's a great question. And I certainly love talking about the solutions that we're providing to companies such as Transcenta in a very collaborative way. But if I step back and look at it, there's really 4 key areas where we're working to develop the right solutions to enable this transformation for companies like Transcenta. And the first area is really in the process intensification technologies. So really looking at the spectrum from the very start of the process, from how do you get very high cell density, very productive cell banking, moving into perfusion and cell retention systems and devices so that you can operate perfusion in a very high productivity, efficient manner, moving into multi-column chromatography, which we just launched a system in June of 2022. Then moving into areas like inline viral inactivation, where you can really continuously execute that step of the process where it's very batch, very time intensive today, and looking how we can really improve I think, the manufacturing efficiency of that process step. And where we've really worked very closely with Transcenta is the development of what we're calling flow-through polishing. So, those are some of the intensified processing technologies that we're developing or have developed, and really taking a look at it from a very holistic process perspective, not only of what are the integrated operational blocks that we need to develop, but also how will they work together and how do they integrate? And that leads me to the next set of solutions is, how do you then control and automate those processes, especially once you start to really connect things together? And that's a really critical step. These are complex processes. And so that process control and kind of orchestration that's happening at that level, it is going to become even more critical than it is in a batch manufacturing process today. And so for us, we've been focused very highly on our control platforms that actually run the different process intensified technologies next level up, and saying, okay, how do you get these different operational blocks to work together, and really providing that overall process control? I think the next element from there is then, how do you monitor that process? And if you look at solutions such as our Bioprocessing Procellix Raman spectroscopy, really providing inline real-time monitoring of those critical quality attributes of your process. We've really been focused in the upstream space in the bioreactor right there, right now. But how do we extend that capability further downstream? Because you can't, I don't think, realize the full benefits of an intensified or a continuous process in the future unless you know what's happening inside of that process, and how do you adjust very quickly in real time. And so our Procellix spectroscopy really enables that capability. And then finally, all of this is really brought together by data. And how do you rapidly assimilate that data so that you can make decisions in real time about your process? Is it in control? Is it doing the things that you need it to do? But taking a look at that big picture and not searching for all the data and having to pull it together manually, but really having that done for you so that the people who are making those decisions are actually spending their time in a quality way. And they're leveraging their skills and their capabilities, not on pulling together Excel spreadsheets, but actually doing the thinking and the analysis to understand, is their process going in the right way? So those are some of the capabilities that we've got today that are in development, and there's a lot more to come because I think the technologies are continuing to advance, but that's where we are right now.
We've heard about how Merrilee and Chris collaborate. Kelvin, what is your view on collaboration in bioprocessing to ultimately advance biopharmaceutical manufacturing?
Well, it may be obvious for me to say that I think collaboration is critical, but I certainly do believe that it is critical. Collaboration can drive organizations to understand what their common needs are and to focus on common solutions. And so when you have organizations that are willing to come together and define what their community-wide needs are, you also create opportunities for solution providers and technology providers to solve that problem, not just for one company, but perhaps for an entire industry. Those kinds of platform processes have really transformed so many lives around the world. And I think there's a need for not only improvement on those platforms or evolution of those platforms into some of the kinds of technologies that we've been talking about under the Bioprocessing 4.0 paradigm, but there's also a need for new platforms to be developed for some of the newer modalities. And the past history showing the value of those platform processes being developed collaboratively will certainly lead to an acceleration of how we can bring those medicines to market. So I think the significant needs and opportunities around technologies that we hear about are really around standards and around even reference materials that anybody could acquire and use to benchmark their own methods, their own tools, their own assays, allowing the entire community to better understand and improve the technologies they use for manufacturing and manufacturing processes. Now that I've said that collaborations, and particularly collaborations at scale, can help the entire ecosystem, I do want to recognize that it's also important to value what might be viewed as small-scale collaborations or bespoke collaborations between two organizations, perhaps a supplier and a drug product company. There is absolutely a place for that, because in those kinds of interactions, one is able to share a little more information between those parties that can lead to more innovations and lead to solutions that you might not be able to achieve through large-scale community-wide collaboration.
Yes, absolutely critical. As advancing biomanufacturing technologies require both from the user side and also from the supplier side. And I think that's why for a smaller company like us, who doesn't have a lot of the resources and expertise as much some of the much larger companies, partnering with a company like Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany, is absolutely critical, given their expertise in equipment design and automation, which together with our process knowledge, we can come up with a solution that I believe can fit the needs of what I indicated earlier in terms of business driver to drive down the cost of goods, but to ensure that we manage our risk to ensure robustness during manufacturing without incurring a lot of unnecessary risk. So I think these type of collaboration is absolutely critical. And I'm hoping that with more of these types of collaboration where companies can share their best practices and lessons learned, the case studies, that once we hear more and more about these successes and also the learnings, that it will help drive the overall industry forward by adopting these more advanced manufacturing technologies that ultimately can benefit our patients.
Thank you so much. Long-time listeners at Future Talk will always know that collaboration is one of our favorite topics that we like to delve into. And before we wrap up today's episode, we do also have to do some real future talk. So Chris, what does your dream biologics facility of the future look like?
I think, at least for Transcenta, our connected, highly intensified manufacturing platform that will be realized next year is already sufficient to meet our current and future business needs. But ultimately, I feel that the vision, which is not that different than when we started down this path, I would say at Genzyme back in 2009, 2010, which is really to develop this sort of end-to-end continuous, fully connected continuous process from, I would say, from cryo cell bags to drug substance and drug product using single-use technologies with real-time release testing. And because these are a fully closed system, we can put it in a controlled, non-classified space in the ballroom facility. So if you can imagine having these manufacturing occurring in a typical laboratory setting because the system is fully closed. And then you can simply increase capacity by scaling up, out, or in terms of what it typically says, numbering up of the same type of equipment to multiply your output with minimal regulatory risk, down the road. So I think this really, to me, is really the dream biologics facility future, that you can be small, but you can have an output of much larger facilities, and it's easy to replicate among different global regions to supply drugs locally to the patients that are in need.
Thank you so much for sharing your vision with us and also for chiming in on your views on the importance of collaboration. And I definitely want to hear from Kelvin. How does Chris's dream scenario compare with Nimble's vision for the future of bioprocessing?
I think there's really great alignment between the dream scenario that Chris has reflected and what we see within our community. And in fact, I'd say to build upon what he's been talking about, that they have been able to achieve, we're actually not that far away from realizing the first stages of those dreams, because the technologies exist. The technologies exist to do that continuous connected processing of drugs to create drug substance. Some of the challenges that we see that our considerations that go beyond technology to fully realizing that vision are actually, again, in the business space. Now, at the same time, within Nimble, we certainly talk about what the design of a next generation factory would look like if you were building it from the ground up. A factory that would be completely flexible, a factory that can deploy any kind of manufacturing approach to make almost any kind of biopharmaceutical, and to do that in a very environmentally sustainable manner. Can we get to carbon neutral or even carbon negative bioprocessing and do that using single-use technologies? And so what does that mean? What capabilities do we have to have in order to realize that vision? Those are things that we think we're making pretty good progress on defining what technology gaps exist and beginning to address and fill in those gaps so that we can more rapidly see those factories that I think we all want to see for the future being deployed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's quite encouraging to hear that it's a possible future that might even be in reach. And to that, I would like to ask Merrilee, what advancements are required to make these future bioprocessing dreams come true?
I think we'll continue to see advancements in multiple areas. And advancements in those areas are going to be required to really, I think, see that vision come to fruition. And maybe there's one other point I'd like to make. I think the industry has a vision, but that doesn't mean that that's the stopping point. I think we'll continue to see progression even beyond that vision. It's a bit of an evergreen environment where we'll see the needs advance of the industry, we'll see technology advance in the industry and from suppliers such as ourselves. But I think there's a couple of areas where we definitely need to see some technological advancement. Certainly in the area of real-time monitoring of your process. I mean, I talked a little bit about our Procellix Raman spectroscopy, but there's a lot of other areas such as biomonitoring of your process. What are the potential contaminants and how do you measure them in real time so that you know if your process may be running awry, if you've got a contamination. If I also think about how do we connect these processes moving forward, physically connect them. I think there's a lot of work to be done there as well. I mean, we've got a lot of great technologies today, but as with everything else, there's always room for improvement and advancement in these areas. No individual player alone is going to make this a reality, right? It's going to require strong collaboration because everybody's coming from a very different perspective with different inputs, different thoughts, and different requirements. And so that collaboration is just going to be critical moving forward.
Thank you so much for your answer. Unfortunately, it has come to that time where we must wrap up the podcast. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to the three of you about Bioprocessing 4.0 and the future of biopharmaceuticals. Merrilee, many thanks for sharing your impulses and expertise with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to engage with the team and looking forward to talking soon.
Chris, many thanks to you too for sharing your thoughts and insights.
Thank you. I really enjoyed today's conversation, and I'm really looking forward to working together with Merrilee and others and suppliers, as well as Nimble, to help advance, I would say, this important bioprocessing technology to ultimately benefit our patients.
And Kelvin, it was a pleasure to have you on the mic for this episode. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated the conversation.
And as always, a huge thank you to everyone out there listening. I hope we've piqued your curiosity and look forward to you joining me for the next episode as I talk to more curious minds from the fields of science, technology, and beyond. But until then, take care and remember to stay curious.